What's going on, college football fans? Welcome back to the First and Long College Football Show. I am your co host, as always, joined by my co host, Mason. Welcome in. We have got our Week 7 preview and prediction show loaded and locked, ready to rock. Mason, how are you tonight, man? We got some awesome matchups that we're going to be going over. Ohio State at Oregon. Uh, we've got the rivalry game, the Red River rivalry, or as a lot of us know it, the Red River Shootout, right? And then we've got Penn State in some Big Ten action going on the road to the Coliseum, and we've got some action in Death Valley as Ole Miss will be headed to LSU. Are you ready to break down some games, man?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the best week that we've had yet as far as big games in the college football season. This is very exciting on the front end. We've had some really exciting weeks, on the back end that maybe didn't seem as exciting going into the week, but this one is kind of has a lot more hype going into it. So really excited to break these down, give our predictions tonight, let you guys know kind of where we're at as of Tuesday night, and maybe give you a little bit of a betting lean. We will save our best bets for the week for Thursday night, but
Yeah.
tonight we can at least give you a lean as far as how we feel about the game and why.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel pretty good about everything that I've looked at so far this week. It's been a busy couple of days. Trying to comb through this thing and find advantages in a couple of these matchups. Specifically the Ohio State at Oregon matchup. Um, you know, uh, Looking on paper, I won't kind of spoil my whole spill here on this thing because I want to go through some of the graphics that we've got and everything. But man, I was just looking for edges, just an edge here, edge there. Um, we got some really good ones this weekend, and I got a feeling this is just going to be another really, really awesome weekend of college football. And we're so glad that you guys are here to discuss it with us. Put your comments in the comment section in between breaking these games down. We'll read some of those comments, put them up on the screen. We certainly do appreciate you guys being active there in the chat. And let's get going on this thing, man. Um, so I've got two different sets of graphics here. Okay, um, let's get one of them added up to the screen here, and we'll get started. Ohio State is going on the road to Eugene, Oregon for a Big Ten matchup. Ohio State is favored by I've seen by 4. I've seen 4.5 yesterday. Now I'm seeing it more like 3.5 at most places. Over under is set at 52.5. Now, I've combed we were just talking about it here on the live show here on the First and Long College Football Show. I've combed through just tons of stats and watched all the highlights, and of course, I've watched the games throughout the season, just like all of you fanatics have throughout college football and fans of Ohio State and Oregon. And I'm just looking for edges in this football game, and these are two really, really good football teams. These are two ultra talented football teams. And there's a lot about these two teams that I still feel like we don't exactly know. Now, Oregon, I think, is a little more battle tested at this point in time, right? Looking back at that game against Boise State, I think everybody in the country was expecting Oregon, when you're ranked number 3 in the country or top 5 or 10 or whatever. When you go play a team like Boise State, it's really a zero sum type situation for you. You either kill them or you're going to hear about it the rest of the year, how you didn't beat them bad enough, or or you lost to them in the worst case scenario. But Oregon is able to beat Boise, escape undefeated in that situation, and looking back at it, I think Boise is a lot better than what people realized at the time. Um, let's kind of go through this, and we're going to look through some of the Oregon stuff first, and let's kind of get our thoughts together on Oregon, and then we'll do Ohio State the same way, and let's give our predictions. Let's go. Uh, Looking at the stats offensively for Oregon, and in some cases these stats are skewed, and I'll preface everything that I'm going to say with that right there. The stats are only as good and as accurate as the total work that you've put on the football field week in and week out. Ohio State ain't played nobody this year, and we're going to get to them here in a minute. And in some cases, Oregon State has obviously had some easier games as well. So we don't have a full picture painted, but something that I really noticed was a lot of these numbers offensively are not as good as last year. And we had last year's entire year's worth of numbers, the really tough matchups, the easier matchups, all mixed together. And these numbers are still not as good as what we saw last year, with Oregon offensively. Now, maybe that's asking a lot. Bo Nix seemed to be like the premier fit for this offense last year. And it seems like it's taken Dylan Gabriel and Will Stein a little bit of time here to get on the same page. It last week struggled in the red zone, threw a couple of picks, and Dylan Gabriel hasn't made a ton of mistakes this year, but when he has, they've been pretty detrimental. And I'm interested to see how things mesh going forward because it seems to me that they're still trying to kind of figure some things out offensively, and then the lack of run game this year in certain cases has kind of spelled some issues for this offense as well. Really putting a heavy load on Dylan Gabriel. You look at some of his stats throughout some of the games this year. Look at his game log. He's thrown the ball a lot in some of these football games. And I think it was due to the fact that Oregon was trying to catch their footing as far as running the football. Who's going to be that go-to guy? There's not like a ton of options, but I do think Oregon's gotten better as the years went on, and they've shuffled that offensive line around a little bit, and I feel like that situation's better right now than it has been, but still trying to figure out some things on offense. What do you think about the Oregon offense going into this matchup? I didn't even talk about the wide receivers. We're going to kind of get through that here in a second, but just looking at some of these stats, I mean, it does paint a picture, and whereas this offense isn't inefficient or anything like that, it definitely it lacks some pop, right? Not a lot of big play potential going on here, as far at least statistically. Um, but it does still show a functional offense. But I think they're going to need a pop play or two this week if they're going to win against the Ohio State Buckeyes. What do you think about the offense so far this year, Mason?
Yeah, I mean, I think the term that gets thrown around for the Oregon offense really this year and even last year is there's a lot of dink and dunk, going on here. I think that that's absolutely accurate. When you look at Will Stein's offense, not a ton of deep shots. They want to protect the football, but get the passing game involved and get the wide receivers and the playmakers involved. You've got Tez Johnson, who I think has been incredible this year once again, one of the best wide receivers in the game. You got Evan Stewart, who we're still kind of holding our breath, hoping that he shows up. He hasn't really been as dynamic of a playmaker as many would have liked. But and then you got Terrence Ferguson, who's been a little bit MIA, I guess you would say. But really, to me, the offensive struggles this season so far have been due to the offensive line being shuffled around a little bit, and in particular, the interior of the offensive line just getting beat way too often. I think they've got really good tackles, but the interior of the offensive line has struggled. And as we know in football, if the offensive line is struggling, your offense is going to struggle as well. This isn't, but I say that, and let me caveat this: it's not a bad offense. It's not a struggling offense as a whole. I just feel like it's not clicking as much as it should, and a lot of that's due to the protection up front.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you, and I think that the receiver play so far this year has been a little bit underwhelming. Now, look, there's a lot of talk. I'm not the one that came up with this. I just, don't shoot the messenger here, but Gabriel doesn't exactly have the strongest arm. I mean, that's pretty widely known. And getting the ball down the field is one thing. I think his long ball is fine. He has to put a lot of air under it. He's got to throw that thing early. You know what I'm saying? But when you get in the red zone and you don't have that rocket arm like a lot of these guys we're seeing these days, like a Carson Beck, or he has trouble zooming it in those little holes, man. And we saw it this past week, against Michigan State, or the week before, or whatever it was. Um, a couple of interceptions right there in the red zone. And if you think that Ohio State isn't going to be really, really good there in the red zone with the secondary that they've got, you got another thing coming, because they are really, really good. And look, quite frankly, this wide receiver group, I talked about them being a little bit underwhelming. They're pretty small too, Mason. They're not like a really big group of guys. This isn't. I don't know. I feel like you're missing that, like, Georgia's wide receivers haven't just like set the world on fire, but I'll just use them as an example. There's a Colby Young there. There's like a
Well, there was
different
a Colby
pitch.
Young there.
Huh?
I said, well, there was a Colby Young there, but nonetheless.
Yeah. What do you mean? Did he get hurt?
Oh, I guess you didn't see. He got arrested this morning for a battery of an unborn child, or assault of an unborn child. I guess he had a little beef with his baby mama, or future baby mama. So, anyways, I don't not to steer that away from the Oregon breakdown here, but
Well, there you have it, folks. There's your breaking news, your Georgia Bulldogs news in the middle of our breakdown. I had no idea. I've been glued into this today. Georgia's not playing a big game this weekend, so I really just wasn't paying attention. But that is quite a shame. But my point is, th- this receiver room, it feels like they're missing like that 6'3", 6'4" type dude. Like these guys are slight built. They got to figure out a way to use their speed and figure out a way to get behind this Ohio State defense. And really, Mason, the only way that I think they're going to be able to do that is going to be by running the football. And they're going to have to be able to figure out a way to bring that defense in. That's their only shot here, because if Ohio State and that secondary that they've got, if they're able to just sit back, I mean, it's going to be, we all know what that's going to be. It's going to be really tough to throw into, um, and not to mention with Dylan Gabriel's arm strength. I mean, it's going to be tough to get over the top of those guys if they're sitting way back. But Terrence Ferguson is a guy that has been utilized a pretty good bit on this offense. Not the tight ends haven't been utilized as much as what I thought they would this season. This slide right here is actually from our Oregon breakdown that we did early in the season. Obviously I updated some stats and things like that, but we had these three guys on here because we felt like the tight ends would be utilized a good bit more than what they have, and we wanted to kind of showcase, what we thought would be, maybe not the strength of the offense, but something that could be used as a strength if game planned correctly. And it just doesn't seem like that's really been the case. I don't know. I don't know what the reason in that is. No touchdowns for any tight ends so far, and it makes me think about Dylan Gabriel, and I don't know the stats on this, and probably the Oregon fans could probably tell me, but doesn't seem like he likes to go to the middle of the field a whole lot. Which is interesting. I don't know exactly how true that is, but I mean, looking at these numbers and comparing them against the numbers for the outside guys, it's apples and oranges. So just something interesting that I noticed while compiling all these stats. We talked about the run game. Jordan James, has been a lot better the last few weeks, but Oregon hasn't been great at running the football, and that's a little surprising. But really, looking back at it with the offensive line that's been shuffled around and things, it makes sense why they've been a little bit better recently than what they are at the beginning of the season. But it's a whole different thing whenever you're about to go against this Ohio State defensive front that is really good, man. And I I think Ohio State's going to be able to just bring those 4 guys, and it's going to be really tough for Oregon to block those guys and get anything going in the run game. We'll see. What do you think about what's the path to victory? I guess for this Oregon offense in this football game. I mean, what do they got to do to be able to move the ball successfully and sustain drives? Because if they can't sustain drives, they're going to keep handing that ball back over to the offense of Ohio State, and we're gonna be talking about a runaway victory here.
Yeah, well, I think in college football as a whole, we're seeing a lot of offenses. The RPO was hot for a long time, and it's still being utilized a pretty good bit. But a lot of the best offensive coordinators right now are kind of going back to a traditional offense, and that's why you're seeing a lot lower scores and things like that as well. But you're seeing these offensive coordinators run the ball effectively to set up the pass, or pass to set up the run, and just I think that you're kind of making it a little bit easier on the quarterback by not having this RPO, because that creates a lot of issues, or can create a lot of issues for some quarterbacks. In this game, I think that Oregon's going to have to pass to set up the run. I don't, against this Ohio State defensive front, you're not going to just run up the middle of this defense and expect to set up the pass that way. I think you trust your tackles. You're a little bit hesitant to run in the middle of this offensive line with the issues on the interior. So you have to trust your tackles, and when you do run the football, go to some zone reads and whatnot. And when you're passing the football, if you want to protect the football, which I think Will Stein does a great job of scheming these types of short passes, but throw to the perimeter, throw some wide receiver screens, and run the football that way. And then what you're doing is you're spreading out the Ohio State defense. They've got to react to what the game plan is, right? So you spread them out a little bit and say, look, you're going to have to beat us with 6 or 7 guys in the box. You're not going to be able to load the box. And I don't think that Ohio State necessarily is going to do that anyways, but
Yeah.
you want to spread this Ohio State defense out, and that will open up the run game later on in the game. I think the whole first half, I think it's going to be really low scoring in the first half, but I really feel like Oregon's path to success, to answer your question, is going to be to pass the football first, and then rely on the run game later on in the game when the defense gets a little bit gassed.
Defensively, this team has done a lot to improve upon what their flaws were last season. Oregon defensively last year was susceptible to the pass. I mean, the numbers were pretty bad against the pass last season, and Oregon obviously went into the transfer portal and went and got Muhammad, who's made a huge difference there in that secondary. But there's been improvements really across the board: safety, cornerback, nickelback, all that. I mean, they're playing a whole heck of a lot better, and they're going to have to. These numbers are super similar to what they were last year. I mean, it really was crazy. Like I said, this is a slide that I used for um, our preseason breakdown. I just went through and updated all of the statistics, and it really is kind of amazing how consistent Tosh Lapoy has been from year to year with the defense here, and made improvements in areas that were outliers. Honestly, the passing defense last year was like 90th in the country to finish the season. So done a whole lot better against the pass so far this season. Now, obviously, we have to take that with a grain of salt, considering who Oregon has played this season. Not exactly, uh, the fun and gun offenses or something. I mean, it's been some pretty easy offenses to defend in some cases. Boise State, I would say, excluded there. Um, Good on third down. The only thing I'm worried about is this team is a little bit susceptible to pop plays in the run game, just a little bit. 41st in the country of run plays of 20 plus yards, 5 of them for the season so far given up. Um, we know what kind of running back room Ohio State's bringing to Eugene. I mean, it's pretty sick, and I would say that Quinshon Judkins is playing even better than what most people thought he would, right? And we'll get into Ohio State here in a minute. But overall, this defense I think is a little bit better than what it was last season. The middle of this defense is what I suspect will be really, really tested here. I like a couple of the pieces on the Ohio State offensive line. And last year, I felt like one of the big weaknesses for this Oregon defense was the fact that they didn't have like a Jalen Carter or a Jordan Davis or just a Mount Cody or something like that in the middle of this defense. I still don't think they do. I think they're a little bit better in that situation, but boy, howdy, do I love the edges. I mean, the edge players here are going to have to play a major role in this football game. They're going to have to contain the edge, and they're going to have to get pressure on the quarterback, Will Howard, throughout this football game. Um, they've got some serious responsibilities between Uiagalelei and Birch there, but I think these two guys are up for the test, man. They are legit, and the middle of that defensive line, I worry about them a little bit, but we'll just kind of have to see what Chip Kelly's got up his sleeve here. Um, what do you think about the defense so far this season for the Oregon Ducks as we kind of scan through some of these players here? Um, I love the linebacker room. I talked about there for a second. The secondary, really, really, I think it's much improved, but they're going to be tested this week. What are your thoughts on the defense so far this year, Mason?
I think it's been pretty good. They really had some issues early on in the season. We saw them struggle against Idaho. We saw them struggle against Boise State, particularly in the run game, which we now know that Boise State relies heavily on the run, which nobody expected they wouldn't. But that's a pretty good team, and I think that Tosh Lupoi probably went into the season thinking that the defense would be a little bit better than it was initially, and really had to figure out his personnel. I like some of the additions that they made. I'm going to go back to your slides here on the back end. Well, they bring in Jabbar Muhammad, they bring in Kobe Savage, they bring in Brandon Johnson. I like all three of those pieces a lot. I really like Brandon Johnson and his ball skills. When the ball's in the air, this guy's making plays. I've seen him. I think he's had one interception, and I think there's been like three interceptions potentially, or three or four that he got his hand on and just barely missed it. The guy's pretty dang good, and had a lot last year. Had a lot of pass deflections, and I think this was one of the ones when we did our preview. It had like 11 passes defended last season, which is really, really good. And then Jabbar Muhammad, I mean, coming over from Washington, that was one of the best, most underrated transfer portal players in the country last year, and he's looking like the real deal. So I like what they did on the back end. I think that this unit is starting to gel together. Communication is so important on the back end of your defense. But I'm just concerned that as good as these DBs are, they're going up against Ohio State's wide receivers, which is a tall task. These are some of the best in the country, probably the best overall unit when you look at from redshirt seniors to freshmen. If you look at the entire unit as a whole, nobody's recruited better than Ohio State. So to me, how they match up is probably going to be pretty important for this game. But when you look at Ohio State and what Chip Kelly wants to do, he really wants to run the football. They're running at just, and it's not a huge discrepancy, but at 53% on the season, they're running the football, which is kind of tough to do when you have a stable of receivers like you do. You definitely have to get them involved. But to what success will the defensive line for Oregon have against this Ohio State offensive line, which we said in our Sunday early preview? The offensive line is the weakest part of this Ohio State offense. I stand by that. I feel like that's a pretty clear cut It's not necessarily a deficiency for the offense, but it is the least impressive unit, I think, for Ohio State. Some people think that they have gotten a lot better on the offensive line. I think that this game will tell me whether or not they actually have. This game is going to test the depth on the offensive line in some way. I do feel with the Oregon defensive line being as good as they've been. How do they play this? That's my biggest question for Oregon's defense. Are they going to keep six in the box and be able to play man on the outside with a little bit of zone on the top end of the defense? Or do they really feel like they're going to have to go 7 or 8 in the box and play strictly man? Depending on the formation for Ohio State. I mean, if they go into 12 personnel, I mean, you got to have 8 men in the box at least. But nonetheless, I want to see on the first couple of drives, what does this defense do? How do they come out? What's their plan to block Ohio State in this offense? In particular, the running backs, because this is a running heavy team. Will Howard can get out. He can run too. It's a big question mark for me, and I don't know if Oregon's going to be able to handle the running game. But at the same time, who has Ohio State faced with a defense like Oregon? Nobody. So this is a game where we have a lot more questions than answers going into it, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, Ohio State has literally played absolutely no one. We can't hardly, and so let me preface this again before we move forward. I said with Oregon, we got to take their stats with a grain of salt. I guess we better take it with 3 grains of salt with Ohio State because they ain't played nobody. I'm talking about nobody. And we're going to talk about another matchup here in a few minutes, a big time matchup. The favorite in this matchup that hasn't played anybody either, and maybe it'll surprise some people the numbers I pop out on that. But anyway, look, we can't take these numbers that I have on the screen here to the right and say that that's what Ohio State's going to finish with this season. They're a lot better in areas than they were. There was deficiencies last year. Kyle McCord had a hard time, and I don't know if it was offensive coordinator wise, whatever. You know, coach just for men over there for Ohio State, Ryan Day, he was calling the plays. You know, and he was one of the last head coaches in the game doing that, especially at a big time place. So he goes and he gets a former head coach here to come off of his head coaching job and come call the plays. This is the games that they hired Chip Kelly for right here. I'm very excited to see what he's got cooked up. I know for a fact that they've been holding back all season. I mean, the schedule's set up perfect. They didn't have to pull anything out of their bag that they didn't want to. And so I'm very interested to see what this offense looks like in this football game against a defense that has a pulse. Nobody's even had a pulse at this point. 2 teams they've played so far were even in the Power 4. So, like I said, take all these stats with a grain of salt. We know what Chip Kelly's about, though, and we know he's the real deal play caller. We know that. And it seems like he's having fun in this situation. Will Howard, I'm super interested to see how they use this guy. They've been running him a little bit here lately. 24 carries so far this season, 64 yards, nothing overwhelming there, but he's got 4 touchdowns. And, you know, you kind of talked about it just a minute ago, the Oregon defensive line. How are they going to play with play this offense? Do they bring a couple of extra bodies? Those edge players, are just going to play such a pivotal role for Oregon in this football game. And whether Will Howard is able to get outside of the tackle box and run around a little bit, I think that kind of is going to be able to keep Ohio State going early in this football game if he's able to get outside the pocket, move the chains that way. I think there's going to be a necessity for that this week because I think you're right, Mason. I think it's going to be low scoring early on in this football game. This hasn't been like an over the top, like overly explosive football team. We know they've got it in them. We know they've got the players on the outside to do that. But this really, I mean, you look at some of the explosive numbers this year, 44th, pass plays, 10 plus yards. That's okay. and it's consistent with what we've seen with Will Howard. So I don't expect Ohio State to come out here this week and just start going bombs away. I don't think that's what this offense is. Do they have the receivers that could do that? Probably, yeah. But I don't think that that's the approach that we're going to see from Ohio State. I think we're going to see a lot like we've seen this season, lots of run, and going to see what they can get away with against this Oregon defense. Um, Again, we'll talk about the wide receivers. One of the best wide receiver rooms in the country, guys. I mean, there's really no arguing that. Jeremiah Smith looks like every bit the real deal, considering the fact that he's leading this team receiving, right? Uh, and you've got guys waiting in the wings, Carnell Tate, Ennis. You know, one thing I did notice with Ohio State, you talked about it kind of for a second earlier, Mason, with how do you get all these wide receivers their touches? Well, I'm going to tell you what, they're not getting the guys that aren't starters their touches. They are getting Egbuka touches and they are getting Smith touches, and they are making sure those guys are fed and well fed. So, they're the leading receivers on this team. I believe Tate was the third leading receiver, and then everybody else is single digit receptions. I think, if I remember correctly. Yeah, they're spreading the ball out between a couple of guys here on this offense and getting their work in. They're lathered up. They're going to be ready for this football game. Both of them are looking really, really outstanding. And then that's all that, not even to mention the running backs. Quinshon Judkins comes over from Ole Miss in the offseason. He's been really good. 60 carries, 468 yards, 7.8 average this season, 5 touchdowns. I really did not think that he would be that guy at Ohio State, to be honest with you. I felt like that last season we saw of him at Ole Miss seemed like something was missing. Maybe he was banged up. I don't know. You don't always know the situation with these guys. Maybe he didn't want to be on that team. I don't know. But so far this season, he's looked really, really good. And then you mentioned the offensive line there. Um, Look, Mason, it's the keys to victory for this Ohio State offense are, I think, a lot more simple than the keys to victory for Oregon's offense. I think you just play within this offense. You've got to be able to run the football, obviously, and I think they're pretty well set up to do that. The going out and getting Seth McLaughlin there from Alabama in the transfer portal at center, I think was a really big deal for this offensive line in the offseason because the offensive line has been a point of contention for this team over the last few seasons. You could argue that if the offensive line plays better against Georgia in that Peach Bowl or whatever it was, there the Midnight Miracle, Ohio State probably wins that football game. Um, uh, it's been little things like that over the last few years that have kept this team from winning a Big Ten championship and a national championship. I think that this offensive line is a tick better. You obviously return some guys from last season, Simmons, Jackson, Fryer. I think it's reasonable to say that they're 5 to 10% better this season than what they were last year, right? But we haven't seen that. We haven't seen them in these big matchups yet. So, I'm holding that thought in reserve a little bit. I think the offensive line is a tick better, and if it is a tick or more better, this Ohio State team could be very, very scary. What do you think about the offense so far this season?
Yeah, I mean, the issue when you're defending this offense is the issue we're going to see Oregon face. I think is that they can beat you in so many different ways. You really have to play light in the box, trust that your guys are going to win, and stop the run, which is a tall task, and then leave the back end kind of spread open a little bit, because you've got two excellent receivers in Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, former 5-star as well, Brandon Ennis, former 5-star as well. They got dudes, right? Um,
Yeah.
so you want to get as much protection on the back end of the defense as you possibly can, and that opens up the running game. Well, the only way that you're going to stop the running game with a light box is if you beat this offensive line, right? Your guys up front for the defensive line just has to they have to beat their guys up front and play gap sound. That's really it really becomes a very tall task for a defense. And I say that to say the Ohio State offense has been incredible. They haven't faced a defense like Oregon. I'm anxious to see what the game plan is. You mentioned, but Chip Kelly hasn't had to hasn't had to dig deep into his bag at all this season. I do think we see some different wrinkles in this game, and then really Will Howard, how he plays is crucial in this game. I think that we can either put him up on a podium after this game, or we're going to be saying, man, he either cost them this game or almost cost them this game, because I mean he plays quarterback obviously, and that's the most important position in sports. But what has he shown us in the history of his game that tells us he can beat teams over the top on some deep balls and all that? And maybe Ohio State doesn't need that. Maybe they can run the football against Oregon. But to me, I really feel like Chip Kelly is going to come out and have some design quarterback runs for Will Howard early in the game, kind of get the juices flowing a little bit, get him comfortable. This is the biggest game he's ever played in, and let him settle in just a little bit before they start taking shots. Kind of open up the pass game little by little, and then you start asserting the running game as well. Who's going to be hot? Is it Quinshon Judkins or is it Travion Henderson? You're going to feed one of those guys. Who's going to be the hot hand in this game? But then when it comes down to the offensive line, this is where Ohio State is going to win or lose. I mean, it absolutely is. It's going to be one up front, and with this offensive line, I do still have questions. Can they rise to the occasion? Can they rise to this challenge? Because the front seven for Oregon is that good. They can be a disruptive part of this game, and the reason that Oregon's able to stay in it and possibly win the game.
Yep, absolutely. Let's talk about this defense. Jim Knowles has done an outstanding job over the last 3 years now. Last year was his second season, so this is his third there at Ohio State. From what he started with 3 seasons ago to what he's got now, he's just done a remarkable job. It was one of the biggest pieces that needed to be fixed on this team's when Ryan Day took over, and here we are, 2024. It sure does look like it's fixed to me. This is one of the best defenses that Ohio State's had in the past several years. You Ohio State fans, let me know in the comment section. I don't remember a defense as good as this one in recent memory. I know there's probably one that I'm overthinking, but it's been really, really good and hard to argue with any of the numbers that you're going to be able to look up on this team. I mean, one of the easiest teams I've researched this season, because every time I pull up a list of those 133 teams, which is what I have to do for every stat, every category, blah, 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 they're at the top of every single one of them, man. I don't have to go far. It's Ohio State. I don't have to scroll the page for really anything. So I don't think there's anything to complain about. I really like this defensive line. The more I've went back and watched, the more I've liked it. I'm interested to see, kind of what the depth looks like as the game goes on. I'm not sure how Oregon's offense is, they've been able to sustain drives this season. And I'm assuming that Oregon is able to sustain drives in this football game. I'm interested to see the depth on the defensive line here for Ohio State, because we haven't seen those guys play any pivotal minutes this season, where they have played and got some experience in the blowouts. But it's a whole different thing when you're on the road. You're in an atmosphere like it's going to be in Eugene. It's going to be a wild, wild atmosphere, no doubt. I like the defensive line. Jack Sawyer done a really nice job this season. Ty Hamilton, I really, really like. Some good pieces there. I don't think they're going to have to blitz a whole lot, but if you do, you got tons of dudes that can do it. CJ Hicks, Cody Simon, Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese has been a really nice surprise. He's made the most of his playing time that he's gotten in some of these blowouts, and linebacker room just looks to be really, really solid, as well as that front four there, front seven of Ohio State. I really, really don't have any questions about, and secondary. There's not much to question there either. This is a big secondary too, man. Like they're pretty large fellas. Like um, they're they're going to be a pretty good bit bigger than these Oregon wide receivers in this football game, and it's a little bit concerning for me. This is a very physical group. Caleb Downs, I don't even think has played his best football this season. Nobody wants to throw the ball over to the side of the field he's on anyway. But you know, you beware. It worries me. Dylan Gabriel's arm strength throwing into the teeth of this defense. It just worries me a little bit. These guys are so damn fast. It's incredible. Um, what are your overall thoughts on the defense? And I guess we'll kind of get into our predictions if you want to do that.
Yeah, so you went through and looked at all the team stats and the national stats, and everything is great for Ohio State. I kind of took a different approach this week and looked at a lot of individual player stats for all of our matchups this week. And what's interesting, so when I look at CFB stats, they only post the top 100 players, right? So I'm hitting Control F, finding Ohio State players who are on the roster, or who are on the list of top 100 players in individual statistical categories. You can't find one. It's really interesting when you look at sack totals, tackle totals, pass deflections. You look at tackles for a loss. They don't show up on any statistical category except for Denzel Burke, who has 2 interceptions, made the list. That tells me that this unit is that this side of the football is very complete. They are playing, and that they don't have just 2 or 3 guys that they're relying on. The entire team is getting the job done. And also, it tells me if you're lacking in stats on defense, it means that you're winning a lot of 3-and-outs. You're getting off the football. You're not on the field a ton to rack up a ton of tackles and tackles for a loss and sacks and things like that. So they're doing a really good job on first and second down to set up third and long, and really affect the quarterback, or affect the offense in that way, which is extremely impressive. I think Oregon has got a very tall task ahead of them on the offensive side of the football, dealing with this defense. It could be the best defense in the country. I don't know of any defense that is this well built, personnel wise. Um, and I don't know what advantage you have. I mean, we've spent, what, 3 or 4 days now trying to find an advantage that Oregon's offense is going to have on this Ohio State defense. I haven't come up with one, Mark. I really dig deep to try to find something. There's not one. You're just going to have to out scheme and out coach Ohio State's defense. That's about the only way, because personnel wise, matchup wise, you're going to have your hands full with this team. I'll go ahead and give you my prediction, and let you give your prediction and close us out. But when I look at this game, Ohio State -4 in this game, traveling to Oregon, so they're on the road, playing in a really tough environment. I mentioned Will Howard is going to be. This is going to be the toughest game he's ever played. This is going to be the most impactful game that he's ever played, or
Yeah.
been involved in. And I do think that matters. I feel like early in the game, both teams are just going to be just a bundle of nerves. I mean, I really feel like, from a betting perspective, I'm kind of staying away from the over and under and the overall spread for this game, because I do think that playing on the road is tough, especially for a quarterback who's never been in an environment like this. He could be turnover prone, and it could cost him the game and things
Yeah.
like that. But I also feel like Ohio State could just come out here and say, "Yeah, no, we're the number one team in the country, and we're about to prove it right now." And they could roll Oregon and beat them by 10 or 14 points or something like that. I don't think it's going to be like a 39-3 win or anything like that, but I think that it could feel like Ohio State is much more dominant than the score maybe necessarily indicates. But I do like, and on Thursday night when we do our betting show, we'll look at some alt lines. We'll look at maybe some first half or first quarter alt lines. I feel like the under in the first half is probably going to be a good play. We'll have to wait and see on that. But for what matters as far as who wins the football game and who loses, I just feel like I know more about this roster, and I've seen more consistency, even though it's been against lesser talent. I've seen more consistency from Ohio State. Um, man, I know everybody's picking Ohio State, which makes me want to pick Oregon because I feel like if everybody's on the same train, then that train's headed the wrong direction sometimes. But I can't I can't get behind Oregon right now, given what they've shown us so far this season. Even though they've gotten a lot better throughout the year, I think that they're playing their best football right now so far this season. I think that Ohio State has got the right pieces and the right players, the right coaches. I think that's a tall mountain for Oregon to climb, even at home. Give me Ohio State to win. If I had to bet against the spread, I would pick Ohio State to cover, just because it's a 4 point spread. I don't know if this is a field goal game. I think it could be a 6 or 7 point game. So give me Ohio State to win this one and cover.
I liked something that you said earlier. You were talking about Jim Knowles and the only way that Oregon is going to be able to win this football game is that offense is going to have to out scheme Jim Knowles and that defense. And Jim Knowles in big football games has been known to be ultra aggressive. And I know that Oregon is going to be expecting that. I expect something in loaded up the sleeve for Oregon in this football game. I think Ohio State is going to be trying to blitz. I think Oregon understands that they're not going to be able to run the football up the middle on this team. It's going to be all for naught if you try to. But this game's going to come down to turnovers. Whoever can get a turnover or two in this football game, I think has got the edge here. And Oregon being at home, I think that's a big deal. I don't think Will Howard is particularly clutch at this point in the season. Ohio State fans, you let me know. I mean, who would you rather have, Will Howard or McCord? And I know everybody's going to say Will Howard, but I'd love for you to put it in the comment section and let's revisit this next week because, um, McCord's playing amazing this season, and Will Howard, I'm a little bit worried about him in this spot, Mason. And if Oregon can get out early, put a drive together, score, and get a turnover somehow, watch out because I think things could snowball pretty quickly for Ohio State in this football game. Um, I'm taking Oregon plus the points here. I'm going against the grain. I'm not so sure that Oregon wins this football game. I thought about this game a lot today. Whoever wins this game, I think they win at 27-24. I think that's the final score. I just can't quite figure out who wins it in my head. But this is going to be a closely contested football game, in my opinion, I think. And if you're giving me +4 for Oregon, I will take it. I think the Oregon Ducks make a statement in this football game, and I don't think this is the last time that we're going to see these two teams face off this season. All right, guys, let's read some comments. I appreciate you guys tuning in. We got a bunch of comments in here. Let's see. Texas would beat Ohio State. I don't even know. Texas just needs to worry about Oklahoma this week. Because if they don't, then they'll end up getting beat. We're going to talk about that game next because that's another one where it's like, oh, poor pitiful. Everybody's all poor pitiful Oregon right now. Okay. And everybody's, poor pitiful Oklahoma. I don't know, man. I don't know. Glenn Cower, next game, please. Enough Ohio State. Yeah, no doubt about it. We're done with that one. That is a big game this weekend, though. West Coast Trams team. I think you meant to say teams never get credit. That's okay. Go Boise State. Tyler Miller, what's up, man? Welcome back. I can't even read all these. Rob Baker, hey man, what's up? Resident Oregon Duck fan. Rob's going to the game this weekend, and for Rob's sake, I hope Oregon wins this doggone thing. Agreed. That's why I think rankings shouldn't come out until week 6 after some conference games. I've thought that for a long time, Rob. I've always thought that. Really, the only rankings that actually matter anymore are the college football playoff rankings. Those are the only ones that even matter anymore anyway. So when those come out, right after Halloween, that's when it starts to get real and the rankings actually matter. Um, but you know what, dude? There's like a ton of people that love the rankings. I don't get it, and maybe you don't either. I don't know, but that people love ranking teams. Rob Baker said, "I lose my voice every game." Yeah, dude, I hear you. Mason could barely talk after that Georgia Alabama game last weekend. For some reason, I was pretty calm on that one. For I don't know why. I was upset in the first half, but pretty calm for the second. Turnovers and explosive plays will determine game, in my opinion. Yeah, I think you're probably right, Rob. Thank you guys so much for watching and commenting. I certainly do appreciate it. Tyler Miller says, "Good luck, Ohio State and Eugene." All right, let's get into. There you are, Hey Tyler. Look how long they've been on here. All they do is talk about Ohio State. Tyler, sometimes I think you might be on some drugs or something, because you just maybe you came in while we were talking about Ohio State. I don't know. Um, but we talked about Oregon as well. So yeah, I don't know,
It's
man.
a big matchup. We got to go a little bit long on that one.
Yeah.
These other three, although I'm equally as excited about all of them, honestly. Um,
Well,
I think
these
we
are
can get these done in about 20 minutes each, probably. Hopefully.
yeah, these are set up a little different. All right, let's jump into it. Texas, Oklahoma. It's the 2024 version of the Red River rivalry. I can barely say it. Red River rivalry. It's an SEC matchup this time, though, and everything's on the line here, especially for Oklahoma. You lose this football game, you've got a couple of losses, right? Um, it changes things. It changes the outlook of your season. Texas, on the other hand, coming off a loss in this football game last year, and there's nothing worse than going to the Texas State Fair and losing to your rival, except going as the number one team in the country and losing to your rival, which could be the chance this season. So a lot is on the line here. This is a huge, huge matchup. And it's also a huge line. Vegas has set this thing at 14.5 in favor of Texas. Now, that line may have moved a little bit today. I think I checked it this afternoon though and updated this. So the over under was set at 49.5 for this one. I noticed that the under is being bet really hard. We were I think at 53.5 to open, and now we're all the way down to 49.5 on this one. So very interesting stuff there, and I can see why people would think that. Let's jump into this matchup. It's two different tales at quarterback for each of these teams, right? You got two totally different things going on. Michael Hawkins, the freshman, pulled off the bench in the Tennessee football game. I really thought Oklahoma's offense didn't have the best plan intact for the Tennessee game. But then again, I don't think anybody planned on, the quarterback getting pulled there before halftime and freshman Michael Hawkins making his way in to play quarterback for the Sooners. I don't think anybody expected that. I sure didn't. Um, and then you've got Quinn Ewers on the other side, who is, from for all intents and purposes, it looks like he's starting this game. He had the oblique injury a few weeks ago. Arch Manning has got a chance to get in there and start over the last few weeks. And it looks like Quinn Ewers is going to be back. And I think that's really good news for Texas. I don't think you want Arch Manning going against this defense. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and throw that out there. I love the prospect of Arch Manning. I think he's going to be really, really, really good. But right now, you like to just be able to use him in those reserve roles and, keep polishing him, because this is a lot different defense than anything that Texas has faced this year, Mason. And it's really not even close. We're going to go through all the matchups here in this one. But real quick, I just want to kind of preface what we're about to talk about with Texas, kind of like I did in our last video that we just did. Uh, just listen to some of the stats for the teams that Texas has played this season. We all know that Texas is undefeated. They beat the snot out of pretty much everybody. It was a little bit of a dogfight with Mississippi State last week, but ended up crockpotting them, put them in the crock pot on a 4-hour cook there, and they were donezo by the end of it. But just listen to some of the stats for these football teams, right? Colorado State. We'll go through the offensive stats first for these teams. 79th total offense. Michigan, 118th total offense. UTSA, 65th total offense. Louisiana Monroe, 130th total offense. 130th out of 133, by the way. Mississippi State, 79th total offense. Specifically, the rushing offenses, 57th, 38th, 84th, 89th, 91st. Horrible. Listen to the passing defenses there. Or the passing offenses. 110th, 130th, 44th, 131st, 58th. Texas ain't played nobody that's had a pulse on offense yet. I mean, I'm talking about this has got to be one of combined all the games you played. This has got to be one of the easiest schedules to defend so far this season, right? And then it's like, all right, well, let's talk about them defensively. All right, let's do that. Let's look at the at total defense here. Colorado State, 99th total defense. Michigan, 48th total defense. That one surprised me a little bit. I thought Michigan was a little better than that. But total yardage this season, they're 48th. UTSA, 85th total defense. Louisiana Monroe, 57th total defense. Mississippi State, 122nd total defense. This team has barely played a team that was offensively or defensively in the top 50 in the country. And that's got to be said. Oklahoma is way more battle tested than Texas at this point. Oklahoma has a way tougher path the first year here in the SEC. There's zero doubt about that. What do you think about the two quarterbacks before we move on? This is a big deal. Quinn Ewers has been in this Texas offense for a few years now. That is very important for Steve Sarkisian and the way he runs his offense. And that's why I say it's so important that Arch Manning isn't playing. I think it's really important that Quinn Ewers is back. But with that being said, it's going to be knocking the rust off. He doesn't have any momentum going into this week at all. And I still feel like in the back of my head, there's still like a 30% chance I feel like we could see Arch Manning this week, Mason. I don't know. I got a funny feeling. What do you think about the quarterback matchup in this one?
Well, that would be something if we see Arch Manning. That I think Oklahoma
I got a funny
fans
feeling, man.
would appreciate that because that means they're probably doing something right defensively. I really like Quinn Ewers, but I'm with you. I don't know if he's going to come in and really have the juices flowing like he would if he had not gotten injured. We'll see. I think he's playing his best football though. I mean, just put the 2 weeks that he missed aside, or 3 weeks if you count the bye week. Prior to that, I mean, he looked very decisive. Looked like one of the best quarterbacks in the country, if not the best. He's a pocket passer. He's not gonna stretch the field with his legs or anything like that. But he is probably the best pocket passer in college football right now. I think that's pretty fair to say. He's outperformed Carson Beck, and really anyone else. I can't say enough about Quinn Ewers, but when I look at Michael Hawkins, the jury's still out. I mean, we've got the sample size for Quinn Ewers. We know kind of what he is. We know his struggles early in his career. We've seen him kind of grow up before our eyes in his fourth season now, total third with Texas. When I look at Michael Hawkins, it's a fresh face, which is, I mean, really, I think Oklahoma fans enjoy seeing a fresh face with, with how Jackson Arnold played in the first 3 games. I think that he left a lot to be desired, particularly in the passing game. Liked what he did with his legs, but not very efficient passing. When I look at Michael Hawkins, he has been pretty effective passing. 8.4 yards average in his pass. He was at 10.7 in his last game against Auburn. Struggled in that game a lot. He had one, I think, 65-yard pass that kind of inflated those stats a little bit. But that was a beautiful pass. I mean, that was a perfect pass. You could not have put that ball anywhere any better than what Michael Hawkins did. And my point in saying this is I've seen him as a passer improve. We saw him against Tennessee, which, oh my gosh, like, could you pick a worse team to start against as a true
Yeah,
freshman?
seriously. Yeah.
I mean, I know he didn't start the football game, but to start his career against that is a tough defense to go out and play against. He stumbled a little bit, but I thought he played very gritty in that football game. And then we saw him for a week, try to figure things out, get the speed of the game down. And now you're starting as a true freshman in one of the biggest games in college football. The moment is probably going to be a little bit big for him early on, but I really like this guy's mentality. I mean, when he came out against Tennessee, I didn't see a freshman looking like a deer in headlights. That's not what I saw from him. So maybe it won't be too big. Is kind of what I'm getting at. The moment won't be too big for him. I like the head that he's got on his shoulders. But I don't know what he is yet. I mean, we can sit here and say, oh, he's good at this, bad at that, whatever. I mean, we have not seen enough to know what exactly he is. He runs the football pretty well. In less than 3 games, he's got 28 carries for over 100 yards. That's getting it done. I mean, he's a true dual threat. But can he take advantage of the weakness of this Texas defense, which is the back end of the defense, and win some games or win some battles over the top with, I think, a pretty good wide receiving group, which I know we'll get into all that here in just a minute. But that's kind of my take on the quarterback matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the big matchups in this football game very clearly is that Oklahoma offensive line against this Texas defensive line. And maybe I'll have like a unique perspective on this. I don't know. I don't know what everybody's saying, but I feel like this is kind of like uh, weakness on weakness here a little bit. I don't think Texas's defensive line is that great. I think they're okay. I like Alfred Collins pretty good, but I don't see any like super disruptive guys in the middle of this defensive line. And Trey Moore has been a little bit underwhelming. The transfer in from UTSA. I mean, this is a big step up in competition. And look, I'm not completely sure about the health of the offensive line for Oklahoma. It's been up in the air pretty much all season. Who was playing week in and week out? You can look at your SEC injury thing and check all that out. Um, this team's allowed a lot of sacks this season. They have not been great at run blocking either. And Hawkins is able to neutralize some of that stuff for this offense. He's able to create rush yards, whereas I don't think there's like a running back on this team that you feel great about handing the ball off to and making something out of nothing. I think Hawkins is kind of your one trick pony as far as being able to, run the football in chunks. And he helps bail out this offensive line a lot. Jackson Arnold wasn't processing information quick enough to be able to sit back there behind this offensive line. They weren't giving him enough time to sit back. Hawkins, they it seems like they figured out and they've got a little better game plan with him. You're going to have to roll him out, bootlegs, rollouts, and give him the option to throw that football or possibly run it as well. Look, you get lemons, you make lemonade out of the lemons that you got, and that's what Oklahoma's going to have to do offensively in this football game. They've got to figure out a way to hit an explosive play or two in this football game. But the defensive line for Texas, not nearly as good as they were last year. Lots of NFL talent lost off this defensive line. 2 first-round talents there right in the middle. Texas didn't even have to worry about scheming against the run last season at all. They averaged giving up 75 yards a game last season on the ground. That's not a convenience this season. And I'm interested to see, how that translates to this football game. if Branson Hickman is good to go, which I don't have any reason to believe that he's not, if he's good to go there at the center position, I feel like everything else kind of follows suit on this Oklahoma offensive line. I don't expect him to be, an unbelievable unit on the field this weekend, but I don't think there's anything on the Texas defensive line that is really going to accentuate that. What do you think about the matchup in the trenches?
Well, I think you're exactly right in saying that these are the two weakest units on both sides of the football for each team. I think that the offensive line for OU, I mean, they've gotten maybe marginally better as the game's gone on. I mean, Oklahoma fans, y'all are going to have to tell me, what do you feel about the offensive line so far? I don't get to watch every single snap of every single game. I just don't have the bandwidth for all that. So I want to know from the OU fans, how do you feel the offensive line is progressing throughout the season? We know they're hurt. We know they're injured. We know they were light going into the season, right? So when your centers start going down, that's a big issue. I'm anxious to hear kind of what the OU fans think about their offensive line. I think that they've gotten a little bit better, but definitely not a good unit. I would say that they're still like not good, overall. And then for the defensive line for Texas, I think that they've played above what we expected. I mean, after losing the players that they did on the defensive line, I've been pretty impressed with how they've stopped the running game. You brought up the stats earlier on the offenses that they've faced, and they haven't faced any killers in the run game or just in general on offense. So, I mean, you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. But are they going to be able to take advantage of this Oklahoma offensive line? That this is a step up in competition, right? Even though the O line for OU hasn't been incredible, I do think that this is a step up in competition for Texas. They're going to be tested in this game. I like Trey Moore off the edge. He's kind of MIA in the backfield to me. It seems like he's not winning as much as I thought he would. Alfred Collins is really just solid. I think at nose tackle. And the other edge, Sorrell, has been pretty good. I think I think they're fine on the perimeter and on the edge of this defensive line. Really like the freshman Colin Simmons. I think he's probably the best player on the defense as a true freshman, which is saying something. If you haven't seen Colin Simmons play, you're going to get a chance to see this guy play this week. He's already got 6 tackles for a loss so far on the year. He's your starting edge, through and through here. But really excited to see what he does. I think that if he's matching up against Michael Tarquin, I think that's best case scenario for OU. But anywhere else on the field, and he's probably going to have a pretty good game. I give the advantage, obviously, to Texas's defensive line, but I do think that this is also a unit that could be exploited, specifically in the inside of the defensive line, if Oklahoma is able to run the football, which they haven't done a ton of this season so far. They really haven't been that productive in the run game.
They're going to have to be in this football game, and they've got an opportunity to do it right here. And like I said, Michael Tarquin, Branson Hickman, those are the keys to this offensive line. If those guys are in there, things seem to be a whole lot better off. Those are the 2 best players on that unit, and they're going to have to be leaders this weekend, and they're going to have to be able to generate some kind of run, some type of rush game. Let's talk about these linebackers for Texas. This is a really good group here. Anthony Hill playing out of his mind so far this season. Have they played anybody? No. Do I think he's really good, though? Yeah. Yeah, he's real good. David Gabinda, we talked about him in the offseason. These are all the guys that we talked about in the offseason. They've all been super productive. They're going to be matched up in a matchup that I feel like they're going to be in a situation to win a lot of times. It'll be interesting to see what Texas does with this defense. Do you subtract the number of linebackers you got out there on the field and kind of back up, or do you play the run? I'm really interested to see how Texas plays this Oklahoma offense. I'm not in love with the running back room for Oklahoma. It's no secret. Javonte Barnes is going to have to step up this weekend. Taylor Tatum is a freshman. kind of a slider built guy. I'm interested to see how he comes into the equation this weekend. 3.65 yards per rush in 2024. That's 101st nationally. Oklahoma is ranked as far as average yards per rush. Like I said, this is another area in which I give the nod to Texas, certainly.
Yeah, I agree. Anthony Hill's one of the best linebackers in the country, I think. He's been lights out since he started, last season. And then David Gabinda is a nice little complimentary piece, I think. Definitely a solid linebacker in his own right. And look, with the deficiencies on the offensive line that we've talked about with OU, you're not going to have great um, running backs. You're not going to be productive as running backs, I should say. The running backs might be great, but if nobody's blocking for them up front, I mean, it makes for a long season as a running back. I'll tell you that. Um, and I think that that's what we're seeing. I think that these are capable backs for OU, and they really haven't just really haven't had a chance to shine. It's going to be a big matchup. I think really to watch. OU fans have to be looking at this saying like, guys, we gotta win here, right? And then if we can just be productive in the running game, then we can, whether you win or not, this game, you can kind of build on that for the rest of the season. You've got plenty of games ahead of you, but in this game, I think that they are going to struggle to run, meaning I think that they're under like 120 yards rushing. Um, but we'll see. I mean, maybe we've got maybe OU's got some wrinkles, that they haven't shown yet that they're able to kind of spend in this game because I mean, obviously you're going to be pulling out all the tricks in this one. It's going to be a fun matchup. I'm with you though. I give the linebackers for Texas the edge.
For Oklahoma to straight up win this football game, gonna have to rush the ball for at least 150 yards. And while doing that, you're gonna have to be able to sustain drives. You're gonna have to be able to run it and know that you're gonna get three, man. Like every single time, three, five every once in a while, six every once in a while. That's what it's gonna take because your offense is going to have to play some defense here against this Texas offense. Keep them off the field, man. You got to sustain drives, eat up some clock, limit their possessions. That's got to be a path to victory for Oklahoma here in this one. Easier said than done. They haven't been able to do that all season. Um, let's look at this Texas secondary. We had kind of talked about it a few minutes ago, and then the pass catchers there for Oklahoma. Again, Nick Anderson been hurt a lot this season, and it's really you know put a damper on the wide receiver room. But at the same time, there hasn't been a quarterback that's been able to really get the ball out. Right? There hasn't been time for passing routes to develop for Oklahoma. So Oklahoma hasn't even gotten to use the strength of their offense this season. And if they, like I said, if they can run the football some, maybe they're going to get an opportunity to be able to utilize some of these guys. And the secondary for Texas, while I feel like they have got to be improved from last season, some of the guys that they've brought in through the transfer portal and things, they are so untested, it's not even funny. So there's really not even any sense in really digging into the secondary or Texas or the stats or anything. I mean, 121.6 pass yards per game allowed. That's second in the nation. I've already read you guys all the statistics for the teams they played. Nobody can fight their way out of a wet paper bag offensively that they've played. So, do you think Oklahoma's going to be able to figure out a way to utilize some of these wide receivers they've got in this football game?
I do. I do think that in some capacity, look, if we just talked about the running game, if they're struggling in the running game, obviously they're going to go to pass it, right? That's naturally what you would do. They've had a lot of success with Bauer Sharp so far this year. He's a young quarterback's best friend at tight end. I like Brendan Thompson. I think he's really gritty. Deion Burks is, kind of started the season really hot. Maybe hasn't played as well here recently. I feel like I haven't seen as much from him here recently. And then Nick Anderson, sort of your big target there coming back from injury. I like the pass catching weapons. I really do. And I feel like with Michael Hawkins kind of getting into rhythm, playing better, being a better passer. I think that there is a potential for them to win here, but not if not. It depends on what Texas is going to do, right? If Texas says, "Hey, we think we can beat you up front with 6 in the box," it's going to be a little bit tough on a young quarterback to need or to thread these balls into tight spaces and tight windows. And if Texas's defense just kind of rushes 3 or 4 and drops back, it's going to be a long day in the passing attack if they're able to win like that. That's where you do have to have some runs, and at that point, if it's not a designed run play, you would hope that Hawkins would take off with his legs and get some yards that way. But um, I like the secondary for Texas. It's weird. I like them individually as players, but I do feel like as a whole, they just haven't been tested yet this year. I think that Andrew Makuba coming over
Yeah.
was a huge addition. Jahdae Barron's already got 5 pass deflections on the year. He's been playing really solid at nickelback. And then your kind of go-to cornerback is Malik Muhammad. It seems like he's been doing pretty good. 4 pass deflections on the year already. But who's going to take advantage of the DBs? Maybe it's Nick Anderson in this one. I think he's due for a big game this year, coming off the injury.
Yeah, Jalen Gilbo and Michael Taft were kind of surprises. Maybe not surprises, but to me, they were kind of guys that we didn't really talk about in the offseason a whole lot. And Michael Taft being a hometown guy, born and raised there in Austin, Texas, and being this game obviously means a whole lot to him. I'm interested to see how these guys play in this football game. It will be certainly interesting. Um, let's talk about this Oklahoma defense against this Texas offense. This is the strength of Oklahoma, folks. Texas is a offensive led football team. Oklahoma is a defensive led football team. We we saw Oklahoma really give Tennessee some fits in that football game earlier this season, and particularly in the run game. Texas hasn't been particularly good at running the football this season. We'll kind of talk about some of the issues they've had with running back. They've it seems like they've gotten a little better as the seasons went on, actually. But we'll kind of talk about the running backs in a minute. Um, everybody on that left side of the Texas offensive line, Kelvin Banks, Hayden Connor, Jake Majors, those are all guys returning from last season. I'm interested to see how those guys, plus the 2 guys there on the right at guard and tackle, match up with, you know, Remason Thomas and Ethan Downs, who have had really, really good seasons, man. 18 sacks so far in 2024. Oklahoma is 9th nationally, right? And have average given up 105.6 on the ground. That's good for 27th in the nation. This has been a really good Oklahoma defense. If there's one spot that they've been more susceptible, it's been through the air. We'll kind of get to that here in a second. But I think that this Oklahoma defensive line is going to be able to cause some issues against this Texas offense. It's not going to be easy peasy, lemon squeezy back there. I at least not early in the football game. These guys, when they're fired up and they're ready to go, and they're energized up in the first half of that game, I think it's going to be pretty tough sledding for this offensive line for Texas. And I expect Sarkisian to probably scheme around that a good bit, but I'm interested to see, does DeJoun Terry play? I don't know. Oklahoma fans, I'd love for you to be able to tell me his status in the comment section, because this is a game that I'm interested in betting on this week when we do our betting show on Thursday. DeJoun Terry's went down several times throughout the season. Didn't play in the last game, I believe it was. Dominic Williams there, I really like him. He's the transfer in from last season. He's had a nice season so far, 12 tackles and a sack. Remason Thomas is a guy that creates the most havoc here on this defensive line. 5.5 sacks this season, a pass deflection, a forced fumble. He's all over the place, and he's a bad dude. He is as mean as his picture looks, for sure.
Yeah, I really like this D line for Oklahoma. I think it is the probably the best overall unit on the team, and that's saying something. I do think that they've got some good pieces, particularly at linebacker, even. But when you look at the depth on the defensive line, I think that it is very much improved, even this year over last year. But but overall, just with what Venables has done to change the roster and the identity coming from a Lincoln Riley offensive led Oklahoma team to now having an identity on defense and being led by your defense. Pretty remarkable job that he's done there. Really like
Yeah.
our Mason Thomas. Like you said, I think, I mean, if you hadn't watched an OU game this year, I don't know what you're doing, but when you do, when you watch this game, you'll hear our Mason Thomas probably more than anybody else on the field. At least when OU's on defense, he's very disruptive. He's in the backfield a ton, causing a lot of havoc, causing a lot of pressure. Even when he's not getting sacks, he's still back there making plays. And then everybody else has just been playing really sound. It seems like when you at the snap of the ball, you see the push that this defensive line gets up front. I haven't seen anybody be able to stop it. I do think going over to the offensive line for Texas, this is a pretty good unit. This is possibly one of the best units in the SEC, but they have not been tested. They have not been tested yet. Anxious to see what they do. We don't have a ton of data against good teams that
Yeah.
that can be disruptive on defense. So it's tough to gauge where they're at, but so far they've handled business. They've been really sound. When you go and look at what they did against Michigan in two probably first or second round defensive tackles for Michigan, I thought that they handled them up front pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the linebacker room here for Oklahoma. You've got all the experience in the world and exactly the dude that you want in the locker room for this big rivalry. Danny Stutzman, as you can see pictured there in his famous or infamous picture, smoking the cigar with the golden cowboy hat on there after the game last season. 20 tackles so far this season for him. I really like Kip Lewis. Sam O there, he gets some playing time, rotating in between these guys. And look, the running game for Texas, I'm not super enthused with so far this season. Now, I feel like they've gotten a little better as the seasons went on, but you can see a lot of inexperience there in the running back room for Texas. Jarrett Gibson, the freshman, uh, Trey Wisner, as they call him, Travion Wisner, sophomore. These are two guys that don't have the experience. They don't have the reps. Um, having decent little seasons, and they're helping out where they can. Jaden Blue is the premier back after CJ Baxter went down in the preseason there. 51 carries, 238 yards, 4.7 average, and he is the threat out of the backfield with 14 receptions, 135 yards. I don't think Texas is going to be able to run the football very much in this game. I mean, is that news to anybody? I mean, first of all, I don't think Texas is that good at running the football right now. That's not the strength of their team. I think they are definitely one of those teams that has to throw to set up the run. Um, and I think Oklahoma is well equipped to shut that down. Oklahoma has given up 16 rushes this season of 10 plus yards. That's 22nd in the country, and only one rush of 20 plus yards. That's good for second in the country. This Oklahoma defensive front seven in general is lights out for the most part. One of the best units one of the best front sevens in the SEC. If you want to look at starters and week in and week out play, they've been really good.
Yeah, well, it's really the whole defense, and we'll get to the secondary players here in a minute. But the defense as a whole against the run is phenomenal. I mean, you've got
Mhm.
DBs flying up and making tackles in the running game. They swarm to the football, and a lot of the mentality of this defense is personified in Danny Stutzman and the way that he plays linebacker. I mean, this is a big guy. He's like 6'4", 250, but he flies around like he's 215-pound, 6-foot linebacker. I mean, he's just extremely athletic for his size. He's a guy who's all over the field. There's no surprise. He's leading the team with 40 tackles. And I believe when you look at 40 tackles, that I didn't jot down where he ranks nationally, but that's top 100. I think that's probably top uh, 30 or 40, if I'm not mistaken, in the country. But which is saying a lot because this is a hungry defense. It's tough to get your stats when everybody's flying around the football, and Danny Stutzman is still able to compile a good bit of tackles. But But yeah, advantage OU for sure in this one. When you look at Texas's running backs, I really like the freshman, Jarrett Gibson. I think he is a star in the making, but he is still a freshman. He's got some issues to clean up in the pass blocking and the pass protection. And Jaden Blue is extremely dynamic. I think that these guys are pretty decent at running the football, but they're going to have their hands full. This says more to me about Oklahoma's defense than it does Texas's running backs. I do think that they're probably better than we thought that they would be, given the injuries that they sustained early in the season before the season even started. We kind of said, "Uh-oh, Texas is going to be really thin at running back. They might be playing some wide receivers at running back and whatnot." And I think that they've been kind of a pleasant surprise for Texas fans in how they've performed and kind of outperformed the expectation even. But yeah, the OU run defense is so good. I don't know that there's a team in the country that I would look at the running backs or the offensive line and say, yeah, advantage them against this OU defense, because I think that they play just absolutely lights out against the run. Although they did struggle just a bit against Auburn, Auburn being a run heavy team, but I say struggled. They struggled by OU standards, but I do think that this is one of the best run defenses in the country.
This is one of the biggest matchups of the game right here. It's the Texas pass catchers versus this secondary of Oklahoma. Billy Bowman named captain, one of the captains of this, for this game here. Um, it's been a pretty good secondary for the most part. 75th nationally, 218.6 yards passing. By the time we get to the end of the season, if they stayed at 218, the ranking will come back to earth a little bit. Teams still haven't played each other. A lot of the best teams still haven't played a lot of the best teams on their schedule, I guess is what I'm saying. And a lot of people's numbers and rankings are coming back to reality now after playing all the cupcakes. And I think Oklahoma's is one of those where if they stay at it 218 yards per game passing allowed, they're going to be, closer to 40th, in the country, something like that by the end of the season. 7.9 average yards per pass attempt allowed. That's 103rd nationally. Leaves some to be desired there. They do have 5 interceptions this season. If there's something that you want to try to pick on as far as offensively, from an opponent standpoint, this is probably it. But you have to be careful because the defense, the front seven there, if they get you in obvious passing downs, they're coming after the quarterback. And as we've seen, they've got some of the most sacks in the country, does the Oklahoma defense. So you got to you got to be patient with this going against this defense. And I think if you feel like you're just going to drop back and pass, and dink and dunk and things like that, and hit long plays on this secondary, I don't know that you're going to have time to do that, especially early in the football game. It'll all depend on how those Oklahoma linebackers and front end play this Texas offense. But um, definitely the most formidable group of secondary players that Texas has faced all season. It's not even close. I know we keep saying that. Um, I just trying to preface everything with that. Texas hasn't played anybody. And this will be the first group of guys that they're going to go against that are going to really provide some resistance. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the DBs for OU, I just mentioned them in the run game, in particular, Billy Bowman and Robert Spears Jennings. I just want to highlight this because I think that they're two of the probably the best safeties against the run in college football. Billy Bowman's got 23 tackles, 1 tackle for a loss. A lot of that is in the running game. They're stepping up. They're keeping their eyes in the backfield to see what the play is, and then making adjustments to that. And then Robert Spears Jennings, even more than him, he's got 35 tackles, 3.5 tackles for a loss, and 2 sacks. I mean, the guy is flying around, coming up from the safety position to be getting 3.5 tackles for a loss and 2 sacks. I mean, probably some design safety blitz and whatnot, but these are two very physical DBs, and they played the run as good as anybody. And then somebody who's not listed is Kenai Walker. Kenai Walker's got 5 pass deflections on the year so far. He's playing, 6 pass deflections on the year so far. He's playing really well at the cornerback spot. I think that the pass defense leaves something to be desired. I agree with you on that. Advantage definitely goes to Texas and these pass catchers, because when you look at what they're doing on the offensive side of the football, Jonte Cook has been sort of kind of like the complementary piece to Isaiah Bond and Matthew Golden, and also Bolden. Has played pretty well. I think Gunnar Helm um, has been someone who comes in at tight end that you don't expect to see play as hard as he does, but he's been really effective. And then the true freshman Ryan Wingo, we know about his playmaking ability and what he's able to do when he does get the football. I don't think you see as much from him in this game, just because you don't want to see a freshman go out and make mistakes and cost you the football game, fumble and things like that. So probably don't see a ton from him in this football game, but I give the advantage to Texas's pass catchers. I do think that when Quinn Ewers is throwing you the football, it makes you look that much better. I think that they're going to have an opportunity here to challenge the OU secondary in a good bit, and probably find some success.
Well, with all that being said, Mason, I'll make it short and sweet here because we've looked at this every which way. I like Oklahoma plus the points here in this football game. Historically, we look at this game. Here's some of the totals going from 23 back to 17. 34 to 30, 49 to nothing. There's the outlier there in 2022. 55-48, 53-45, 34-27. That's a not that one. 39-27. There's a 12-point victory in 18. 29-24. These games have been pretty close for the most part, even when one team or the other wasn't that great. And I think both of these teams are at least good. I think that Texas is great. But I think Oklahoma has got a weird elixir of players right now. And Michael Hawkins has got that it factor a little bit. And it just seems to me like Michael Hawkins might be one of those guys that we obviously we know he's raw. He's so young, but this moment just seems like it might be able to fit him. It'll depend on that offensive line, but I think he's going to be able to be effective in this football game. I think this is going to be the rivalry game that all college football fans want to watch there at the State Fair this Saturday. I like the over at this point. It's at 49.5. I like the over at this point. I'm not betting under anything under 50 in this football game. Um, I see why people are betting the under, but it's sunk too low at this point. Give me Oklahoma plus the points here. I think Oklahoma more than likely loses this football game. I think Texas wins, but not by 14.5. Not 14 in the hook. What do you think, Mason?
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you. I feel like Texas wins this football game. But did you know? I mean, you mentioned the scores going back. I took a look at the spreads of those games in the past 10 years. When a team is favored by three or more scores, they're 0-4 in those 10 games against the spread. I mean, they may have won the game, but against the
Couldn't
spread, they're
cover.
0-4. Couldn't
Yeah.
cover, and so I think you see a lot of the same in this environment. Um, I worry about the condition of Quinn Ewers and his arm. I think he's going to be 100%, but I think that they're going to want to kind of test him out a little bit, let him get going a little bit. Obviously, they see him in practice, so they're going to know where he's at. But I don't know. I don't know that Texas comes out and just starts scoring right away, and against a really tough OU defense. I just don't see that happening. I think the defense keeps Oklahoma in this football game. And then Michael Hawkins is going to have to make some plays. It's tough to be in this situation as a true freshman, but you're here. You might as well make the most of it. They are going to have to rely on him to not only win the ball or win the game with his arm and win some balls over the top, but also when those are not there, they're not always going to be there with this wide receiving group. But when they're not there, you got to tuck the ball and run. extend some drives, be effective on third down, and extend the drives that way. But I like OU in this matchup. I don't like them enough to pick them. I do think that Texas is really good. I don't know if this is the team that is really designed to exploit Texas's deficiencies, like they might face later on in the season. So give me Texas to win. OU covers, and I'm with you. I like the over if it stays at 49.5.
All right, guys. Thank you all for watching. I do appreciate it. I would read all the comments, but Tyler Miller has spammed them. Rob Baker had left a couple comments. I think we're good there. Rob Baker had to leave us. He said, I'll watch later. Thanks for watching, Rob. I certainly do appreciate you, buddy. And good luck to Oregon this weekend. He said there's some tickets available next to where he's sitting at the game in Eugene this weekend for $300 to $400. That kind of surprises me.
Yeah, that's not bad. Let's go out there, man. Let's just take a trip.
Yeah, no problem. Let me see if I can get the PJ fueled up.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Let's get into our next matchup here. We got a couple more. Let's try to get through these. Mason. Let's fix that. Ole Miss headed to Death Valley. It's a night game in Death Valley. Woo-wee. Crazy SEC matchup at night. Ole Miss is favored by 3.5. Over-under is set at 63.5. Vegas is predicting whoever has the ball last going to win this one. 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. Very excited to see this matchup because I think these two teams are a whole lot closer than what our preconceived notions have led us to believe earlier in the season. I think LSU is a little bit better than you can't overreact too much in college football because if you do, you would have jumped off the LSU wagon early in the season, right? And I'm not saying LSU's going to the playoff or win a national championship or anything, but I think they're a little better than what we thought. Ole Miss, on the other hand, if you looked at their first 4 games, you would have thought they're winning the Super Bowl, the World Series, the national championship, and 3 Heismans, right? I mean, that's just everybody's like, wow, this is what it's like when you just buy the best team in the country. And then they ran into a formidable team, and things didn't go so well. Last week, Ole Miss bounces back against South Carolina and what I think is a good defense, but scored 27 points, and it was never a close football game. South Carolina, never really threatened offensively to do anything in that football game. But my whole point is, the longer the season goes on, the more I feel like Ole Miss is a defensive-led football team, and I'm pretty sure that they are at this point. This team is going to rely on that defense. They're going to be able to hit some plays offensively, but I don't think they're the well-oiled machine that we thought they were in the first few games. Now, Jackson Dart's been really good. You can see the numbers there. You see all the passing stats, second in the country pass yards per game, second pass plays 10+ yards. They're very, very explosive through the passing game. That is no doubt about it. The key to victory here for LSU is going to be keeping everybody in front of them. And you could honestly kind of say the same thing for Ole Miss's defense, but we'll kind of get into that in a second. Very, very good passing attack here, as you would come to expect for Lane Kiffin and one of his offenses. Trey Harris has been unbelievable this season. 52 receptions, 885 yards. That's almost as many yards and receptions as he had all year last year. 5 touchdowns so far, 17 average yards per reception. Juice Wells has been pretty good. 17 receptions, 371 yards. Did have a fumble last week. South Carolina fans and him kind of had their own little game going on in a game within the game last week. And Caden Lee's been a nice surprise. This is a really good passing attack here. And the run game leaves a little bit to be desired, Mason. I don't know that the offensive line is necessarily built to run the ball up the middle. I think this is one of those teams we kind of talked about that is going to have to throw the football around to open up things to be able to run it. And Matt Jones ain't it at the running back position. I mean, he's a guy he's still pretty young and doesn't have a lot of experience. So maybe one would expect that. But as of right now, Matt Jones ain't the answer. Henry Parrish is trying to do it all himself, and I mean, by the end of the season, man, he's going to be war slap out. They brought JJ Pegues in. He's ran a lot of short yardage situations, scored a few touchdowns, and helped out in those, like I said, short yardage situations. The 325x tight end is really really tough to stop, and got a lot quicker feet than what you think. But the rush game has been a little bit of a bugaboo for this Ole Miss offense, and it's hard to sustain drives and keep the sticks moving whenever you can't get that 3 or 4 or 5 on first or second down. The playbook is limited at 3rd and 10, and that's exactly what this Ole Miss offense has got to try to avoid in this football game, in my opinion. Um, and I think they're going to have an opportunity to do that. But as I said, it's not been a great rushing attack. What do you think about this offense so far this season for Ole Miss?
I think they've been really good. Surprisingly, Ole Miss is led by their defense this year. I don't, I don't know that, I don't know that many people would have said that going into the season. I
No.
don't think I was thinking that. I mean, I knew they would be good. I was wondering how they would gel and things like that. But that's not to say that the offense is bad or not even great. I mean, I do think that they're pretty good, but that speaks more to the defense. Um, they do have some problems on the defensive line. I think that the interior of the defensive line is getting beat too much. Diego Pounds, I've seen him get beat a few times. He's supposed to be,
You mean
one of the
offensive
best.
line?
I'm sorry, yeah, on the offensive line. He's gotten beat a few times, and overall the interior has not really been there. We knew going into the season that they were going to struggle on the offensive line, or at least this would be the weakest unit on the offense. But they really struggled against Kentucky, and then against South Carolina, I saw them play a little bit better. They weren't perfect by any means. They definitely got beat. That's a really tough South Carolina defensive line you're facing. And I think that now, when you go against LSU, this is an opportunity for this O line to build some confidence because um, they're not going to be nearly as good as the past two that you faced, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that it won't be hard. I do think that the linebackers present some challenges. You're going to have to get to the second level if you want to extend the run game. So that could be a little bit of a challenge once those offensive linemen, break their first level and get to their second blocks. But I think up front for the defensive line, things are going to be a little bit easier. Maybe they build some confidence this game, but overall, I really like Jackson Dart. I think he is one of the best quarterbacks in the country, at least statistically. I like what he presents, and I really like Henry Parrish in the run game. He's been extremely effective when given the opportunity to run. Again, going up against this defensive line, maybe this is the opportunity for him if these offensive linemen can win some assignments. But yeah, overall, I mean, I don't have anything bad to say about this offense. It's humming. You know what I mean? They had the down week against Kentucky, and then came back against a similar defense and played much better. Scored another 2 touchdowns. I mean, it was pretty good. It's a pretty good little outing there.
Yeah, and they didn't need to go throwing down the field at the end of the football game, I guess was kind of my point too with the South Carolina game. I mean, when you're up, what was it, 20 whatever by 20 points, I guess necessarily essentially at halftime, you don't need to come out and throw the football around. So, um, this game right here, I think is just about being able to stay on schedule. LSU hasn't been particularly great at creating havoc. Um, So I think if you can just stay on schedule, then your offense is going to be fine here. Um, and Vegas is obviously predicting that, considering the point total for this game is over 60. Um, Defensively for Ole Miss, it's been a really good season. There's not much to pick on here. I mean, just to be honest, there isn't anything to pick on so far. Number one in tackles for loss, number one in sacks. 24 sacks so far this season. That is crazy. Third down conversion allowed, 23.96%. The game that Ole Miss lost this season, the winning team scored 20 points. There's literally nothing to complain about. as far as the defense. I mean, would you like to add anything, Mason? Because I mean,
Well,
they've been really
I mean,
good in every aspect. I mean, pass yards here. Okay, I will add one thing. Let me add one thing. And I'm worried about this in this football game, so I'm glad I remembered to say this. I've seen the last couple of weeks against Kentucky and against South Carolina, even um, the secondary getting flagged. Now, more so against Kentucky, but several times in that Kentucky game, the secondary got flagged for holding on for dear life, essentially, getting a wide receiver and putting him in a seatbelt. Um, that could be a problem here, and Ole Miss can't have that. Now, they're probably told that if somebody's going to just blow past them, go ahead and grab them. They probably told them that, and I don't know, but that could be a problem this weekend. I'm not sure what Chris Hilton's status is with his injury, but Kyron Lacy, you know, you let him get going. You talk about an offense getting to humming. Kyron Lacy can put a team on his back now and go out and score 3 touchdowns if you don't watch out. So if there's one area that I do have a little bit of a complaint, it would have to be in that area there in the secondary. Very highly penalized. Ole Miss has had a pretty good bit of penalties all season, really averaging a pretty good bit of them per game, as I saw dissecting this team a little bit. But what are your thoughts on the defense?
well, I mean, it's been really good. They've got individual players who are getting a ton of stats, which is tough to do when you're not on the field that much. But they've been really effective. All these guys I'm about to list were in the top 100 in these stats, but and I think I mentioned it in the early preview, but I'm just gonna say it again for safe measure for those who didn't hear it. Trey Amos has eight pass deflections and 2 interceptions on the year. That's really good. Trey Washington plays opposite of him. He's got 5 pass deflections. Linebacker Chris Paul, 41 tackles, 7 tackles for a loss. Suntarine Perkins, 6.5 tackles for a loss. J.J. Pegues, 6.5 tackles for a loss. Princely Hughes, 6 tackles for a loss. Walter Nolan, 6 tackles for a loss. Jared Ivey, 5 tackles for a loss. And then finally, linebacker T.J. Daughtery at 38 tackles. I think I hit every position on the defense there.
Wow.
They have all been playing extremely well, and they're flying around the football. Obviously, with all the TFLs I just mentioned, they're getting behind the offensive lines and getting a really good pass rush. That it's tough to beat teams when they've got a good defensive line, and Ole Miss, and make no doubt about it, Ole Miss has a really good defensive line. Did see Walter Nolan go out in the game against South Carolina. It seems like he's ready to play, but kind of monitoring his status. That's a big loss if he's not able to go this week. He's definitely one of the best players on that D line.
No doubt about it. This LSU passing game is the strength of this offense. We'll jump right on into LSU. I don't think LSU is even going to try to run the football very much in this game, Mason. I really don't. I don't think they're going to try to. Now, you know, obviously they're going to at least a few times, but I don't think that's a huge portion of the game plan here. And I think they're going to have to pass a little bit to set that up. And so maybe you see it a little bit later in the game, but I mean, I think there's one path to victory here, Mason. It's throw that damn football and don't turn it over. And we've seen Garrett Nussmeier in his career when he gets zoned in. I mean, he can be really tough to stop, and uh, they've got the wide receivers to do it. Can Mason Taylor get involved here? This has been an explosive offense. This has been an offensive led football team. Um, 7th in the nation passing yards, 8th in the country 10+ yard passes with 67 of them. 20th 20 plus, 29th and 30 plus. I mean, you can pretty much look at any statistic. The weakness is the run game, no doubt about it. Durham has been kind of really the only shining light in that running back room for the most part. I guess you could say Jackson at certain points, but this hasn't been particularly a great running team. I worried about that in the offseason. the running game numbers looked amazing last year, but it's because you had a Heisman quarterback that could just take off anytime he wanted, and it looked like the defense was stuck in like they were frozen in the VCR or something. I mean, just stuck there, and he'd run right past them. He made this offensive line look like they were a lot better run blocking than what they really were last season, and we kind of saw that come to fruition a little bit this season. Um, but I don't think LSU necessarily is a team that has relied on the run game a whole lot anyway. What do you think about this LSU passing game?
Oh, it's been really effective. I think Nussmeier has stepped in and played as advertised. We were concerned it being his first full year starting and whatnot, but he looks like a veteran out there. He's got a really good deep ball, I feel like, and I think he's playing really effectively. Surprisingly, Mason Taylor has been his number one target, or at least pass catcher. He's got 28 catches on the year. Aaron Anderson comes in second with 27 catches. He's also leading the team in receiving yards. And then Kyron Lacey is sort of your red zone threat. He's got 5 touchdown receptions on the year. And has been, I mean, as advertised, at 352 yards on the year.
Really good.
Looking really
Yep.
good. And what's also interesting about this LSU team that was so reliant on Neighbors and Thomas last season, well, this year they're spreading the ball around a pretty good bit. They've got 5 players on the team with at least 12 catches, 5 players on the team with at least 100 yards so far this season. So that's been pretty good to see. That means that your quarterback has a really good rapport with the entire unit of the wide receiving unit, and he's able to be on the same page with a lot of these guys. So I think that says a lot about Nussmeier, and obviously the wide receivers for getting open, but really like the LSU receiving core. You mentioned it. They probably have a slight advantage against Ole Miss on the back end of their defense. Are they going to step up though? Because I do feel like Ole Miss is going to be able to just kind of sit with 3 or 4 up front, and then or send 3 or 4 up front and then sit the rest of the defense on the back end. Nussmeier is going to have to be extremely accurate in this game, but he's shown an ability to do that. I think that he could very well kind of put the team on his back and win this football game.
Yeah, I think LSU is going to be able to move the football in this game. I don't think it's going to be. Um, I think Ole Miss better, be able to move the football in their own right because I think the offenses are going to be able to eat in this one. That offensive line, we talked about it for LSU. You've got your 2 stars of your offensive line there on the edges. The center, that's the new starter on this offensive line. They've allowed 2 sacks all season, right? 4th in the country. That's really good. 14 tackles for loss allowed. That's 5th. A lot of that has to do with the fact that they don't run the ball as much as some others. They just don't. But this offensive line, they're good at what they do. They're good at pass blocking, and um, you know uh, they got their work cut out for them this weekend. Though there's no doubt about that. This will be one of the best, if not the best, defensive line that they've faced this season. And we watched LSU early in the season kind of struggle a little bit on the line of scrimmage with USC. And the longer that image stays stuck in my head and the longer the 2024 season goes along, the worse that looks, right? And so that does scare me just a bit. I've been saying since the offseason that I didn't think this offensive line was quite as good as what everybody thought they were. Um, they are that good in pass pro, but haven't been able to get a push running the football at all this season. Um, let's talk about the defense. I think we nailed down the offense. It's pass to win. It's pass to win. The defensive returners here, Harold Perkins, he's obviously a key player in this football game as well as Greg Penn, and then Major Burns there on the back end. LSU returned a bunch of guys this season, but it was a lot of guys off of a bad defense. What you bring in new is the defensive coordinator, Blake Baker. And let's look at some of the numbers. We did this earlier in the season. I believe it was for what game was it? I can't remember what game it was now. But we looked kind of like a progress report. We looked at what LSU's defense was doing in 2023 versus what they're doing in 2024. This week, we've got another look at it here, and you can see the improvement starting to really take hold, Mason. We're seeing all the numbers looking better at this point. Every single one of them look better, minus QB hurries, and that's so marginal, right? Half a QB hurry per game difference there. Um, you're seeing a lot of gains on this defense. I think LSU is one of those teams. We haven't seen the best of this defense, and we'll probably see it get a little bit better every single week. They're going to have their work cut out for them with a really good wide receiver unit. But I think the biggest thing in this football game is play to win in the red zone if you're LSU. Ole Miss is going to be able to get their yards in the middle of the field. I don't think they're a huge threat to be able to run the football and keep the ball away from you the whole time. Keep everybody in front of you if you're this LSU defense, and I think you're going to have a shot to possibly win this football game. But Blake Baker is obviously making a big difference here for the LSU Tigers in 2024.
Yeah, well, I mean, I mentioned the fact that the Ole Miss offensive line has struggled. They'll have an opportunity to kind of improve on their outlook for the season in this game against the LSU defensive line. But we can turn that right around and say that the LSU defensive line has an opportunity to eat against this Ole Miss offensive line. And that could very well be the case in this game. This would be a prove it sort of game for this LSU defense. I mean, if they go out here and hold, do what Kentucky did to Ole Miss, I mean, which who would have thought that we would be talking about, can LSU be as good as Kentucky in this game?
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of crazy, but yeah, I mean that it's possible. I mean, the jury or the book is out there now. LSU doesn't have the dudes up front that Kentucky does. They just don't. Kentucky's got one of the best defensive lines in the country, definitely at least in the SEC. But can you play a similar style and get some success if you're LSU's defense? I think you probably can. Now, for the deficiencies they've got on the defensive line, which I think that they're just average. I don't think that the defensive line for LSU is bad or anything like that. I really like their linebackers. The issues have been on the back end for this defense. I do think that there is a possibility that the Ole Miss receivers just kind of go off and Jackson Dart just kind of goes off. But this is a prove it game. Make no doubt about it. For LSU, they're probably tired of hearing how bad their defense is and this and that. Blake Baker, I'm sure, is tired of hearing it. He's going to want to make a statement in this game. And I don't know, man. That's playing at night in Death Valley as well. I mean, the defense is probably going to have an advantage there, or definitely going to have an advantage when it comes to the crowd noise and things like that. How much can they take advantage of that? That's the biggest question to me. But maybe they bow up. Maybe they bow up in this game and limit what Ole Miss is able to do. The more I think about it, the more I think it could happen. To where you're limited them, probably not to 17 points, but can you limit them? Can you keep them under 30? I think if you keep them under 30, that you really give your offense a chance to go out and execute. But yeah, mid 20s, I feel pretty good about LSU's chances.
Yeah, absolutely. And the biggest improvement here on this defense is, in my opinion, and the most crucial one is opponent third down conversion percentage. Nearly 45% last season, and you're all the way down to 35%. And this plays really well into the game plan against Ole Miss. If you can stop that run, which we have no reason to believe that LSU can't stop a run and an attack that's not that great, you're going to be able to get Ole Miss into some second 10, third and 10s. I think there's going to be touchdowns and punts in this football game. I don't think there's going to be long, methodical drives. I think it's going to be touchdowns and punts. If one of these teams could figure out a way to run the football once they get a lead and play some keep away, that would probably go a long way to securing a victory. But I don't see either one of them really being able to do that. Let's get into our predictions here. I'll come right out and say it. I've got LSU, the home team here, plus 3.5. If it was anything under 3, if it was 2.5, I'd probably take Ole Miss. But I think there is a decent probability that LSU wins this football game. And I think LSU, as I said, the perception doesn't match what's actually coming out there on the football field. We not many people have watched LSU football since that big matchup at the beginning of the season. And perception is that Ole Miss is this national championship contender, and in a year where nobody looks like an elite football team so far this season, like the team to beat, they possibly could be. But this is a tough ask right here. Going on the road at night at LSU, this is going to be as raucous gets. Give me the Tigers. Give me the big eye on the field there, and give me that LSU crowd to be able to really, really make a difference in this football game. And I think this LSU defense is going to play their best game of the season.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I'm kind of with you as far as against the spread. Probably leading LSU in this one, but make no doubt about it. If this game gets out of hand, I think it's going to be Ole Miss that's winning and kind of running away with it.
I agree.
I don't think there's any way that we're seeing LSU win by 2 scores or anything like that. I think if LSU wins, it's going to be a dogfight, and it's going to be really because they're playing at home. I think that's really the huge advantage here for LSU. How big is that home field advantage? Is it 3 points or is it 6 points? Playing at LSU at night could be a 6-point advantage. So take with that what you will. I like Ole Miss to win the game. I don't see any reason to bet against them right now as far as winning the football game, just straight up. But I do think that it is going to be a close game overall. It's going to be a really fun game, and I think a team wins it by 1 to 3 points, no matter which way it goes. And there is a really good chance that LSU is on the right side of this. I could definitely see that, especially like I said, if the LSU team keeps it under 30, keeps Ole Miss under 30, then I like their chances in this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a de facto college football playoff eliminator, Mason, with the teams that each of these teams have left on their schedule. It's hard to believe that either one of them could take their second loss here and still make it to the college football playoff. It would be that much harder. We'll see what happens in Death Valley Saturday night, 7:30 Eastern. Can't wait. Thank y'all so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Jeremiah, Vandy will cover. Who does Vandy got?
I think he's about a week too late for that one.
And David Swinson, hey, what's up, David? Said Utah. I don't know what that means, but
I think he was talking about Tyler Miller's little comment there, saying Pac-12 teams should have never left, and he's saying Utah is one of those Pac-12 teams that left, went to the Big 12.
Yeah, well,
maybe.
I mean, what choice did anybody have after USC and Oregon were leaving? I mean, they didn't have any choice. If they wouldn't have, it'd be a dying program right now. I mean, let's just be real.
Yeah.
That would talk about killing your program. You want to kill your program? Don't have a conference to go into, and you'll figure out the quickest way to kill your program. All right, let's get this set up real quick. Thank y'all for watching. I hope y'all will hit the like button for us. That would help us out tremendously. Hit that thumbs up button if you're not subscribed. We hope you'll consider doing that. Going through all of our Week 7 previews and predictions. If you don't like watching the long live show, that is understandable. Although we do love you coming and hanging out. We are chopping up all these videos into more, obviously independent videos. Those will be released tomorrow. So if you miss something, then it'll be out tomorrow. You don't necessarily have to go back and watch every single minute of this if you don't want to. But we want to give you guys the opportunity to comment and come on here and do that. And we like having conversations with you guys, no doubt. All right, let's jump into our last matchup of the weekend here. Is going to be Penn State traveling to the Coliseum. Here we go. Penn State going on the road to USC. Penn State is a 5-point favorite here in the Coliseum out in Cali. 47.5 is the over-under. The first thing I think about whenever we talk about this football game is the physicality that Penn State is going to bring to the table here, Mason. Um, it's been a really physical football team that's been at Penn State for year in and year out for several years now. And the very first game that I think about and I kind of compare this to, the first thing that pops in my head is USC going and playing Notre Dame last season with Caleb Williams. That's the first thing that pops into my head. And if you guys don't remember, USC went on the road to Notre Dame. Notre Dame was kind of middling around, not doing that well, right? And you're like, wow, Caleb Williams is going to go in there, probably light them up. The lines of scrimmage were way too much for USC that day. They lose by like 40 points. And while I don't think that Penn State goes on the road and wins by 40 points here, it seems like a mismatch physicality wise. Eric Gentry gone off of this defense. I guess he's hurt, or I don't know if he redshirted or got hurt or whatever. Bear Alexander, he quit. He's a quitter. He quit on his team. He's gone. You USC fans, you know, call it whatever you want. He quit, and that, whether you think he's really good or you don't think he's really good, the statistics from last year don't lie. He was a big part of that defensive line and was a big part of the game plan going forward. So as I look at this matchup, I'm trying to find ways in which USC can win here, and I just don't see a ton of them. I really don't. It's going to have to be through the passing game. It's going to have to be USC connecting down the field. And with this Penn State defense, I don't know about that, man. I just don't really know if that's going to be able to happen. Are they going to have time to let plays develop down the field? I think Penn State can bring the base package on defense here and not have to bring a lot of extra bodies and play defense that way. So what do you think about this matchup? What do you think about Penn State here and USC? What can USC do to have any kind of edge in this football game? I don't see a category in which they do.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty tough. I mean, physically up front, Penn State is clearly better on both sides of the football. Like Penn State's defensive line much better than USC's offensive line. Penn State's offensive line much better than USC's defensive line. Um, Nobody's doubting that. So what I think is going to happen in this football game is Penn State's just going to pretty much run the football at will and have these long methodical drives that end in 3 or 7 points. I don't think there's going to be a ton of punting from the Penn State side of the football when they're on offense. I think that I just don't feel like you're going to stop them and keep them out of the red zone. So the path for success for USC is to do the same thing on the offensive side of the football. Try to find ways to extend these drives and keep your defense fresh, right? They're going to get worn out because Penn State, I mean, statistically, that they have not had the big plays. I think we're as good as Drew Aller has been this year, and I think he has been pretty good. I think he's taken a small step in the right direction when it comes to the deep ball, and the big play potential. He looks better in Kotelnicki's offense, but still looking to see that big play potential. Some of that is due to the wide receiver play. They're 53rd in passing plays of 20 plus yards down the field. So I think if you're USC, you're looking at that and saying, okay, we feel like we can load the box, right? And just test Drew Aller to beat us over the top. Well, you're loading the box against a team that's probably just going to beat you, just
Yeah.
put a hat on a hat, regardless of how many bodies you've got in the box. So I don't know if that's going to work, but that's probably is the best strategy. I mean, when you're talking about just from a play calling perspective, but the two running backs are phenomenal in this football game. They're two They've got two RB1s. Nick Singleton's 15th in the country, averaging 102 yards per game. And Katron Allen is 55th in the country with 73.4 yards per game. Collectively, they're 8th in the country in rushing yards of 10 or more, or 10 or more yards per play, I guess, or whatever. So they've been really effective. The receiving core for Penn State, I mean, there's not a receiver in the top 100 in total yards, and I think that's because they did not hit on Singer like they thought that they would, or excuse me, Fleming. They didn't hit on Fleming like they thought that they would, and there's nobody really behind them. Fleming is not a wide receiver one for this offense. He's just not. I don't think that they've got the tight ends like they've had in the past. For Penn State, there's really not a pass catching weapon. I think that the best pass catchers are the two running backs coming out of the backfield. So it's more ground and pound. As much as they are trying to manufacture the big plays down the field, it's a lot more ground and pound from Penn State. Kind of a lot of the same stuff there. But going back to USC, I mean, Miller Moss started the season playing really well. Had the big win against LSU, and that was really the best that his offensive line has played all season long was against LSU. Maybe that says a little bit more about LSU than we've really looked into. But since then, they haven't played well, and also since then, Miller Moss hasn't played well. He went from, I think it was like 77% completion or 73% completion down to like 66% completion in the past three games.
61. It's on the screen right now.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I had my notes pulled up there. But yeah, I went from 72% to 61% in the last three games. So it hasn't been great here recently. And a lot of that's due to the offensive line and what they haven't been able to do up front for him. But he does have the pass catching weapons. I mean, they've got pass catchers. I really kind of struggle to figure out exactly, why they haven't been able to scheme some guys open. Miller Moss is not a dual threat quarterback, I wouldn't say, but he's not a pocket passer either. I mean, he's able to escape the pocket when he needs to, and extend the plays there a little bit. So it's a little bit of a surprise when guys like Zachariah Branch and Deuce Robinson, when they're not able to really go out and get involved as much as you would expect from a USC and a Lincoln Riley offense. But to me, if USC is going to win this football game, I mean, it's got to be it's going to have to be one up front with this offensive line. And I don't know how they're going to do it. It's a really tall task when you got guys like Abdul Carter, Zane Durant, Danny Dennis Sutton coming at you on the defensive line. I mean, those guys are for real. But somehow, some way, USC's got to find a way to block those dudes, because if not, I mean, we see what Miller Moss does when he's under duress. He kind of folds a little bit. So that's unfortunately, I mean, that's not a great game analysis. I mean, yeah, block your defenders and you'll win the football game, duh. But at the same time, it's how else are they going to win this football game? I don't see it. The offensive line has played that bad here recently that has to be the pressure point. You guys have to win up front. You got to put a hat on a hat, get to the next level, create some runner lanes for Woody Marks, get something developed in the running game to keep the defense off of the football field, because I don't think that USC is going to just go out there and score every drive, even a field goal. Like, I don't think that they're going to push the ball like that. So when you can do it, you're going to have to kind of play a little bit slow. Don't do a lot of up tempo or anything like that. Keep the defense off the field, give them a chance to turn the ball over and get you another possession or something like that.
I think this is a big opportunity for Penn State to flex their muscles on offense and show that they are better than what they were last season. And, looking at the statistics that we talked about for Drew Aller, nobody's made a jump over the last few years like he has as far as yards per pass attempt from year to year. Literally no one has made the jump that he's made. So I think that this offense is a little bit better. I'm worried about the lack of wide receivers. Does it matter in this football game? I don't think it matters because Penn State's going to be able to line up and get it how they want it. And here's some analysis for you. USC is soft on the lines. They're just soft. And Penn State is the opposite of soft. And I don't see this one being that particularly close, Mason. I think Penn State wins this thing by 10 points. The only thing that makes me hesitant is the fact that they got to go travel halfway across the damn globe to do it. That's the only thing that really worries me in this football game. It's a 3:30 p.m. game, so it's not like they're going to be going and playing a 10 o'clock game at USC or anything. So I don't think it is going to affect them all that much. And I think Penn State is going to be able to push USC all around the football field, and I think it gets pretty ugly.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, nothing like I could see it happening, right? I could see USC winning this game in an upset fashion at home. I'm not saying it's out of the realm of possibility, but
Look at that right there that ESPN's got.
wow, that is absurd. 51% at USC is favored. Is that what that's
What
saying?
the? Yeah.
I don't get that at all.
Which don't ever follow matchup predictor on ESPN, people. Don't
Absolutely.
ever follow that because that thing, I mean, that thing's been wrong since day one. Y'all know how AI is. It can't even talk normal to you. It don't even know how to do like real, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a robot. You can tell it's a robot. This right here is
Yeah.
some machine that they threw together, and I just don't believe in it. 51.8% chance. There's a better chance that USC wins this football game. There's no way, dude.
Yeah, I don't see that at all. I mean, even if that matchup predictors taking into account home field advantage and things like that, I don't get that at all. I mean, it could happen again. Like I said, USC could very well win this football game, but nothing that they've done so far versus what Penn State has done so far indicates to me that Penn State shouldn't win this football game. Um, they probably should cover. But I will say, similar to what we've talked about with Ohio State, Penn State hadn't played anybody. USC has at least beaten an LSU, you know, but they also just lost to Minnesota. So I don't know. As far as where they're at right now, I feel like USC's kind of spiraling, just on and off the field. It seems like. And then Penn State's more of on an upward trajectory. They're in the top 5 for the first time, and I don't see anything that indicates to bet against Penn State right now in this football game. So I would say Penn State to cover in this one.
I think Abdul Carter has 3 or 4 sacks in this one. Give me Penn State. All right, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. I certainly do appreciate it. If you missed anything, please go back and check it out. If not, if you can't do that, you ain't got time. We'll be releasing these bad boys tomorrow. I hope that y'all will please go hit the thumbs up on that so we can get the video out there. We're just trying to keep the lights on over here at First and Long College Football Show, and it's been a slow week. I think everybody's little tummies were full of college football after this past weekend. And so now that we've all digested what we saw, and now we can gear up and get ready. We're kind of weird in the fact, Mason, that we're like really fully ready for the games by Tuesday night. So
Yeah.
we got the whole rest of the week that we're just kind of like twiddling our thumbs, but we got to get these videos out early, right? So we have to make our minds up really early. I think everybody will be ready for another entertaining weekend of college football, and I think it's going to be crazy. Maybe we don't have 2 games like we had, Tennessee and Alabama going down to unranked teams, but I think we're going to see some crazy stuff. I wouldn't be surprised to see Oklahoma figure out a way to upset Texas. I wouldn't be surprised to see LSU beat Ole Miss, right? I would be very surprised to see USC beat Penn State, but I've seen crazier things happen. There's a lot of potential this weekend for some crazy stuff to go on. We're going to have a betting show on Thursday, guys. If you're into betting, or even if you're not, we talk about all the football games across the board, just the ones that we feel are the best bets for the week. That show's called Between the Lines. Thursday night, 7:30. We do it every single week. It's a very quick show, about 30 minutes. And you're more than welcome to come join us and throw your bets into the window with us. We would love for you to do that. That's going to be it for tonight. Thank you all so much for watching. Thanks for tuning in the First and Long College Football Show. I'm Marcus. That's Mason. See you next time.